We're now at the public participation portion of the meeting. Are there any members of the public who have questions or comments? Mr. Singer?
Yes, I was at the July 28th meeting where the bids were opened, and as you all realize, it was a long time in recess before it came back, and as a result, I didn't feel comfortable stretching that meeting any longer, so I'm going to ask some of the questions that I would have asked at that time. The amount to be refunded, I'm talking around numbers, 108 million.
Refunded or refinanced?
Okay, if refinance is the correct term, then we'll go with that. And the amount of the issue is 117 million, a difference of $9 million. When I did ask about that, I was told that that is for escrow. Could somebody please explain how we use that $9 million of escrow, what its life is?
The amount that goes in escrow is the amount required to refund the 3 issues. One of the reasons why there's such a big difference is we're right up against the August 15th payment. So that payment had to be provided for in escrow. That's one of the primary reasons for the difference. In total, I think Mr. Billingsley did say the other day, he talked about the difference in rates. And really when you compare cash flows to cash flows on the 2 scenarios, that's where the benefit comes in. Part of the difference is the fact that this refunding was right up against the August 15th payment for all 3 of those refunded issues.
So there were approximately $9 million worth of
No, I said that was a big component of that. I can't itemize the whole thing,
but that amount, you know, is a one-time, if you will, bump in the road. Why was it necessary to fund that through the issue as opposed to other funds that were available to the Board of Education?
the closing date is prior to that payment date, so you refund all the cash flows associated with that. Essentially, and Mr. Billingsley would have to come back and talk about the mechanics of the structuring of the whole thing as we're getting into.
Well, let me see if I can answer that on a layman's perspective. It would seem to me that we would do that. It's much like if you can finance your closing costs when you refinance your house, that's typically what you would do rather than do cash out of pocket, particularly if you're going to move somewhere or if you need additional cash. I would say here that rather than take that some $9 million out of district funds to fund the escrow, it's better to finance the whole thing over a 30-year period, because the whole purpose for doing the refinance to begin with is to help with cash flow situations as they exist currently.
And I think essentially what Mr. Billingsley would tell you is that first principal payment out of the new issue essentially reflects a payment of that. So in effect, you move that interest payment to February 15th. But you're carving out a piece of the whole deal and really trying to talk about the piece.
See, my view, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, is to fund this thing of paying off the old folks and making provision for the payment next February that's due. Okay, we are borrowing $9 million that we're going to be paying principal and interest on for 30 years. That's my concern. That's what I'm seeing. Okay, please teach me if I'm wrong.
I mean, we need to have a discussion about the entire payment stream before and the entire payment stream after. The payment stream after reflects about $3 million less in this fiscal year. It reflects about $7 million less for the next 3 years, and then maybe, and I'm trying to remember about five, well, let me finish, about $5 million after that. It never returns to the $16 million that it was before. So you're talking about incorporating interest savings, you're talking about the spreading of the maturities, all to fit with what we think is more appropriate given our financial circumstances.
Now, the refunding was of $107 million out of approximately $178 million outstanding. So there are still payments of principal and interest on that approximately $70 million.
Right.
So what would be interesting to me and all the people who voted for the 24 mil tax is if we could see for the next meeting and a schedule year by year of what these payments are going to be, you know, against the budget, because certainly we know all the interest rates, we know the rates at which things are going to go. And, you know, my concern is that while I applaud the idea of trying to get the best deal, the $16 million includes talking about the $178 million that is outstanding at this moment, as opposed to the $107 million that will close and become $108 million that will become $117 million next Tuesday. It's numbers. I'd like to be able to see how we stand against this $15.9 million standard for principal and interest payments. And I think the taxpayers would be very interested in that.
And we'll go through a closing process where we will get debt amortization schedules, those kinds of things. So it'll be, I mean, it was estimated in the POS, so it's really pretty close because the winning bid was close to that. So that would be no problem.
So, I mean, at this point, we must have some idea of
And I
that
just
component
talked about that.
of the budget that's going to be presented very shortly. How much for the new school year is going to be put aside for principal and interest payments?
And that's what I went through earlier, about $3 million less in the fiscal year that ends 9/30, about neighborhood of 7 to 8 million less, 2011, 12, and 13, and then I think it drops to about a $5 million annual amount difference, and then it eventually levels out to in and around 13.
If I heard correctly, in 2023 and 2024, the annual payment on this issue will be $14 million.
I don't think I said that.
There's one year where it goes up, but it's only a 1-year term, and it's when some of the other debt maturities are rolled.
And we're speaking from memory here.
And,
so-
I mean, we don't have this in front of us, so we're
Yeah, I-
somewhat of a
This
distant
is the kind of stuff you have to know right at hand. Yeah. But it's very important because that's your, my interest is not to criticize. My interest is to ensure that we can maintain the quality of education that we have here in Bluebird long after I'm dead and buried. We moved here 2.5 years ago. We love living here. We love what we see. We just want to make sure that the best of Bluebird continues.
All right, are there other comments, questions? Sure.
Just a comment on this agenda that we have today. There is no amounts listed for the audit and engagement letter with Carter, Riggs, and Ingram, which there was last year. There's no amount listed under obsolete items, and there's no amount listed under the contract for Glenwood Incorporated. Is it possible that we could get those numbers, and is it possible that in the future those numbers could be on the agenda?
For some of those things, I suspect the answer is yes.
Well, one thing, and this is my fault, I forgot to post the items on the agenda. I was out of town this weekend and just simply forgot to do it. Our email was down, so that's my fault.
Okay.
Sorry.
So they would normally be on there, is that correct?
At some point prior to the meeting,
Okay.
And
but except for personnel.
they'll be on the website, like,
It has
Be on
been
the website.
passed, it's just this time.
And this contract for services with Glenwood, I don't know that contract will be on the website because
That one
the
will
student's
not.
name is in it.
Oh,
So,
but we've had amounts in the
It's-
past without the student's name.
sure, well, that's
So-
fine.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And let me say, for those of you who are not able to be here on the 28th, when we did close or approve the bond issue, the refinancing of the bond issue that's going to close on the 11th, it seemed perfectly clear to all of us who were here that what we were doing was a very appropriate and wise step to be taken, because it will reduce the interest rate by approximately 1%, which is very significant, and will reduce the cash flow payments that are having to be made by substantial amounts. They vary from year to year, but they are significant. And in times of falling income, this is one of the strategies that was developed through the task force to help with our cash flow pressures, because this was a way to refinance a debt that's at one interest rate to a lower rate and reduce the amount that's having to be paid annually for the payments. And of course, the difference in what the payments were and what they're going to be is then freed up for the board to use each year to operate the schools. So the whole idea of it was conceived for sound and good reasons, and as we were told by the experts who were here, we're in a very unusual position to be able to even do this. Not every school board was in a position to take a step like we took last week for financial reasons. And the ratings that the indebtedness of the board received from the rating agencies was quite good, and especially good in light of current conditions. And the reason the rating was good was because the financial condition is good, and because the transaction made good sense for the board. So,
And two, we talked about, with regard to, are we locked in, we talked about,
Excuse me.
68,
Microphone.
about $68 million of that is callable in 2015. So at our discretion, we'll be able to pay that off early should finances, should we be in a position to do that, and then the remainder of the debt will become callable in 2015. So we have times where we can potentially pay off early without premium or without penalty. The other thing we did when we refinanced at a lower rate, currently the market's upside down, meaning it costs us, and it's about as true of a negative arbitrage situation as you can be in, because investment rates are so low. We shrunk the gap that it's going to take us to get back right side up, meaning we can invest and earn at a rate higher than what the money cost us. So we certainly shrunk the gap. Will have to happen over time for us.
and Mr. Singer was here and participated in the entire process, and I don't say anything that I just commented on to suggest that you're being critical necessarily. You want information, and that's a perfectly legitimate thing, and it will be available after closing. We'll have schedules, and they'll be made available.